What's up everyone, it's King Moosh here with JCross X to welcome you all back for episode 19 of Class Overview. For those who aren't familiar, the Class Overview series is a collection of informative videos where we're going to be discussing the different classes in Fire Emblem Three Houses.
We'll be going over general information about each class, like their certification requirements, stats, abilities, and their overall strengths and limitations to determine their viability and what units are a good fit for each class. As per usual, these videos will be gameplay focused, so there shouldn't really be any major spoilers, but I advise you anyways to watch at your own discretion, and if you haven't played Three Houses yet, you absolutely should.
This episode will be focused on the Brawler class. It is a 5-move class with a Thief-like movement archetype rather than the standard infantry movement. We forgot to mention this in the Thief video, but this means that Brawlers and Thieves don't suffer the movement penalties of Forest, Thicket, and Stronghold tiles that other infantry classes do suffer from. Brawler also has one class ability, Unarmed Combat, which as its name suggests, allows you to fight without a weapon. We will discuss this more later on in the Mastery Ability section. To certify for Brawler, units will need at least a C rank in Brawling, though it can be somewhat reliably gambled at a D+ rank as well. While Brawling is an excellent weapon type, most units don't have a lot of reason to actually train it early since the combat arts obtained from D and C rank are not that useful, so this requirement can feel a little out of the way, but it is still relatively low investment for most units. There is also an unfortunate additional requirement, which is that this class is exclusive to male units. However, female Byleth specifically can still pick up the Mastery ability for this class in New Game Plus if you've mastered the class in a previous playthrough with male Byleth. As for the skill rank bonuses, Brawler grants a +2 to Brawling and +1 to Axes. It's not a very expansive list, but these are pretty much exactly the ones you would want if going down the Brawling class route. The natural promotions for Brawler are Grappler and possibly War Master, which required A rank in Brawling and A rank in both Brawling and Axes respectively. War Monk is also a niche alternative promotion option which the Brawling bonus is still helpful for. These are simple boosts that will always be helpful as long as you continue down the Brawling class line, and I can't imagine why you would choose Brawler if that's not what you're planning to do.
Brawler is definitely not one of the standout classes that you'd pick for the stats. The base stats aren't terrible, but they are strictly worse than classes like Mercenary and Thief, which have higher or equal bases across the board, with the exception of HP, which sits at 28 for Brawler. The growth rates are pretty solid, as it's tied for the highest HP growth with Brigand at 30%. Brawler also shares the 10% speed and dex growth that Thief has, which also unfortunately means that it has no strength modifier. It also has some pretty hefty penalties for magic stats, with a -10% growth penalty to magic and res. For physical units, this isn't the worst, but it is a bit strange that its res growth is worse than Armor Knight, a class that notoriously does terrible against enemy mages. Lastly, its stat boosts are alright too. The class is a +1 to HP, +2 to strength and dex, and also suffers a -1 to res. On paper, this is slightly better than something like Thief since it only has the +2 to speed and dex. A boost to speed is pretty important as if you manage to quad with gauntlets you can do a lot of damage. The issue lies in the fact that units you often want to throw in this class, especially since it can only be males, will not be doubling, and as such the boosts aren't too impactful and probably better on a non-gender locked class like Thief. Overall, it won't hurt units to be in Brawler since its growth rates are solid, but it definitely won't be my first pick for stats as there are definitely classes out there with better bases like Thief and Armor Knight, or just better boosts like Brigand and Cavalier.
Upon mastering Brawler, you will gain Unarmed Combat as an equipable ability. Obviously, this is useless while you're still in Brawler or if you promote it to Grappler, War Monk, or War Cleric since they all have it as a class ability, but this means you can transfer it to other classes. Like I mentioned before, Unarmed Combat lets you fight with your bare fist as a brawling attack rather than using gauntlets or any other type of weapon. Your fists have a base hit of 70% and 0 weapon weight, as well as 0 additional might or crit. Fighting unarmed also obviously means you have infinite durability, but that comes with the downside of not being able to use combat art since you don't have an actual weapon with durability to spend. I'm just going to cut right to the chase, this ability is awful. It can be fun to use because it's hilarious to watch your units beat up enemies with their bare hands, but from an actual gameplay perspective it's egregiously useless. As a class ability it's still not useful at all, but it's not as offensive since at least it doesn't take up an ability slot, but as a mastery ability, there is just no way this can be justified to go in any build, especially since there are so many great abilities to pick up at the intermediate level. I find Unarmed Combat similar to Lock Touch, in the sense that it attempts to solve a problem that isn't really a problem in the first place. With one exception, this is not a game where you get randomly thrust into battles without being able to prepare first by restocking on weapons. And even on that one map, all your weapon durability gets refreshed beforehand. You should always just bring a good pair of gauntlets if you want to brawl, and I can't think of any situation where your inventory slots are more limited than your ability slots. Even if you're low on money, which is rare in this game, training gauntlets are cheap, abundant, and have a ton of durability. In exchange for just 1 extra point of weight compared to unarmed combat, they have a 20% higher hit rate and can use combat arts. And as I alluded to before, most units who would bother spending all that time in Brawler in the first place to master it will probably continue down the Brawling class line, which means in every case except for War Master it will continue to be a class ability. This makes it already extremely situational mastery ability even more situational.
As for strengths, there really aren't that many, so I'll try to keep it brief. The movement for Brawler at the very least is slightly above average at 5 with a complement of Thief-like movement. Obviously, having forest walking isn't needed on every map, but the classes that do have it definitely appreciate it. However, it's much more useful in classes that have standout performances like Grappler, or classes like Assassin that have access to stealth shenanigans. Additionally, the stats, while not great, are definitely not a hindrance either. As I said, the growth rates are on par with Thief, and the boosts are okay. Although the bases aren't anything special, overall the stats definitely lean to being more helpful than hurtful. Lastly, but most importantly, Brawler is one of only 2 classes at this point that act as guard adjutants, easily the most useful of the 3 adjutant types that is a very nice safety net for slower squishy units. However, the other intermediate class that acts as a guard adjutant, Armor Knight, is generally just the better class.
Unfortunately, Brawler is weak in pretty much every area that matters. The stats, while probably the least bad aspect of this class, are still not good by any means. The lack of a strength stat boost or growth rate modifier are particularly harmful because Brawling can apply unit strength multiple times, so either or both of those would have been very nice for increasing damage output. The combat performance is average at best, and compared to Archer or Cavalier, the performance frankly just seems bad in comparison. The Mastery ability is easily among the worst in the game and has a genuine argument for being the absolute worst ability in general. I already trashed on unarmed combat enough before, so there's really no need to restate everything, but to summarize, it's just completely useless and outclassed by training gauntlets, and taking the time to pick it up as a mastery ability feels even more pointless because it's available as a class ability on most of the promotion options. This class just feels like a bait option for gauntlet users, when in reality, they'd be much better off using Brigand instead. Brigand's +2 boost to strength might as well be a class ability when used with gauntlets, since it will apply at least twice, providing a sizable increase of damage, and Deathblow is immensely useful, especially with gauntlets. The fact that Brawler is gender locked just further rubs salt in the wound. You're taking a class that is already extremely situational at best, and then imposing a restriction of about half the units in the game from even being able to use it at all. It's a nonsensical decision that is perfectly consistent with the nonsensical design of this class.
We really had to scavenge for actual strengths for this class. The stats and by extension the movement are alright, but it's not enough to save the class at all. We feel pretty confident about giving Brawler a second 1 out of 10. Without a doubt, this ranks up as one of the worst intermediate classes we have discussed up to this point, and arguably the worst intermediate class in the game, even if, spoiler alert, we are getting to some pretty bad ones soon. I can't really make a good case for the class since somewhat decent stats are not enough to save a male gender lock class with easily one of the worst abilities in the game, especially in the intermediate stage where picking up masteries are so important. As for unit recommendations, we honestly think that no physical unit in the game should ever certify, or god forbid, Master Brawler. Some would have to go out of your way already to certify in some units, and the intermediate seal is better spent in classes that provide immediate stat value like Thief and Armor Knight, or a class with a good mastery like Archer and Brigand. Despite all this, if you do have some desire to use this class, we have some options that can work. Male Byleth, Caspar, Dedu, Raphael, Felix, and Balthus all have slightly higher bases than a boon in the brawling skill. While these are not particularly fast units with the exception of Felix and potentially Male Byleth, without female options the pool of fast units is definitely diminished quite a bit, especially since that pool is already not the biggest to begin with. As for comedic purposes, mastering Brawler and Dimitri and having the Boar Prince beat up people with his bare hands is quite entertaining. It also has some niche use in the sense that using combat arts on Dimitri sometimes causes him to break his weapons at a faster rate, so there is something I suppose. Again, Brawling is a good weapon type, but this class really just isn't it, and we truly think it's best if you avoid using this class on your physical units.
It should serve as no surprise by this point that we are dropping Brawler all the way down to the deepest depths of F tier. Most classes in this game have weaknesses, but are at least good in one particular area. I can't really identify that for Brawler, it's just bad at everything as far as I can tell. However, don't let this class affect your perception of the Brawling weapon type or Brawling focus class as a whole. There are some very good Brawling classes that we will get to later on in the series, and even in other physical classes, gauntlets can be really useful. By all means, feel free to train your Brawl rank while you wait for these classes to be available, but I would highly recommend against wasting your time in Brawler. There's way better things you can be doing during the intermediate stage. That's basically all we have to say about the Brawler class. If you like the video or have any thoughts of your own, please leave a like and make sure to comment.
I also recommend checking the description if you're already subscribed to both of our channels.
Stay tuned for episode 20 on JCross Extra's channel, where we'll be moving on to the next intermediate class, Mage.